The first time Xavier Reeves truly saw Josephine Edwards. She was standing in the dusty window of the mercantile, her fingers trailing across a bolt of blue calico fabric with such longing that it made his chest ache. And when she pulled her hand away and walked toward the door empty-handed, he knew he had just witnessed something the rest of Independence, Missouri, would never notice. It was late spring in 1878, and Independence had grown into a bustling town of nearly 8,000 souls, all of them too busy with their own concerns to pay much attention to a woman of 28 who had long ago been relegated to the edges of polite society. Xavier had arrived in town 3 weeks prior, hired on at the Patterson Ranch just outside the city limits. He made the ride into town every Saturday for supplies, and every Saturday for the past month he had seen her. The first time had been purely accidental. He was loading grain sacks onto his wagon when she walked past, her worn brown dress practically blending into the mud-colored buildings behind her. But something about the way she moved caught his eye. There was a grace to her step, a quiet dignity in the set of her shoulders, despite the way everyone's gaze seemed to slide right over her as if she were made of smoke. That day, Xavier watched as she entered the post office and emerged moments later with a small package tucked under her arm. Her face had lit up with such genuine pleasure that he found himself smiling in response. Then a group of young women her age had swept past, their colorful dresses and loud laughter creating a stark contrast to Josephine's quiet presence. They did not acknowledge her, did not even seem to see her standing there. One of them had nearly knocked the package from her arms, and still no apology came. Xavier had frowned at that, disturbed by the casual cruelty of it. But what disturbed him more was the way Josephine simply adjusted her grip on the package and continued on her way, as if she were used to such treatment. As if she expected it. Now, a month later, Xavier found himself actively looking for her during his Saturday trips to town. He told himself it was mere curiosity, nothing more. He was a man of 32 who had spent the better part of his adult life drifting from ranch to ranch, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. He had no business being curious about any woman, especially one who clearly had troubles of her own. But there was something about her that he could not shake. Maybe it was the contrast between the invisible woman the town saw and the flesh and blood human he observed. When she thought no one was watching, her face became remarkably expressive. He had seen her smile at a bird building a nest in the eaves of the general store, had watched her pause to help an elderly man pick up vegetables that had spilled from his basket, only to have him look right through her when she handed them back. Xavier finished loading his supplies and found himself walking in the direction she had gone. He spotted her near the edge of town, entering a small, weather-beaten house that sat slightly apart from its neighbors. The garden in front was meticulously maintained, full of vegetables and herbs and a few struggling flowers. It was the only spot of real color and care on the entire street. He stood there longer than he should have, memorizing the details of her home. Then he shook his head at his own foolishness and climbed back onto his wagon. The ride back to the Patterson Ranch took 45 minutes, plenty of time for Xavier to question his own sanity. What was he doing, mooning over a woman he had never even spoken to? He knew nothing about her except that she was alone and overlooked, and that she had kind hands and sad eyes. "You are losing your mind, Reeves," he muttered to himself as the ranch came into view. Tom Patterson met him at the barn, his weathered face creased with concern. "Got the supplies. Everything on the list," Xavier confirmed, jumping down from the wagon. "Had to go to 2 different stores for the nails you wanted. Thompson was out. Figures." Tom helped him unload, his movements efficient despite his 60-some years. "You hear anything in town? Any news?" Xavier shook his head. "Nothing much, same as always." That was not entirely true. He had overheard plenty while waiting at the general store. Mrs. Abernathy had been holding court near the fabric section, her voice pitched to carry across the entire establishment. "Poor dear," she had said, though her tone suggested she found nothing poor about the situation at all. 28 years old and not a prospect in sight. Of course, after what happened with the Thornton boy, what can anyone expect? Her reputation was ruined before it even had a chance to form. "That was 10 years ago, Martha," another woman had interjected, though she sounded more curious than sympathetic. "Surely people have forgotten by now." Forgotten? How can anyone forget? She threw herself at that boy, absolutely threw herself at him. And when he rejected her for that pretty little thing from Kansas City, well, the whole town saw her humiliation. Some things a woman simply cannot come back from. Xavier had gripped the bag of coffee beans in his hand so tightly he was surprised it did not burst. The casual viciousness in the woman's voice had made his blood boil. But what could he do? March over and defend a woman he did not know based on gossip he had overheard? That would only make things worse for both of them. Now, as he finished putting away the supplies, Xavier found himself thinking about those words. What had really happened 10 years ago? And more importantly, why did everyone in town seem determined to define Josephine Edwards by a single moment in her past? The next Saturday, Xavier made sure to finish his business in town a bit earlier than usual. He told himself it was because he wanted to get back to the ranch before dark, but the truth was something else entirely. He wanted to see her again, wanted to understand why she occupied so much space in his thoughts. He found her at the lending library, a small building tucked between the church and the schoolhouse. Through the window, he could see her running her fingers along the spines of books, her face alight with an expression of such pure joy that it transformed her completely. Gone was the invisible woman who walked the streets unnoticed. In her place was someone vibrant and alive, someone who clearly loved the world of stories and ideas contained within those pages. Xavier hesitated at the door. He had never been much of a reader himself, but something pulled him forward. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and Josephine looked up, startled. For a moment, their eyes met, and Xavier saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. As if she could not quite believe someone had entered the library at the same time she was there. The librarian, an older woman with spectacles perched on her nose, smiled warmly at Xavier. "Can I help you find something?" "I am looking for something to read," Xavier said, the words coming out rougher than he intended. "Been meaning to start reading more." "Well, you have come to the right place." The librarian gestured around the modest collection. "What interests you?" "We have some excellent adventure stories, histories, even some poetry if you are so inclined." Xavier glanced at Josephine, who had gone very still, her hand frozen on the book she had been examining. "What would you recommend?" he asked, directing the question at the librarian but hoping Josephine might answer. She did not. Instead, she quietly pulled the book from the shelf and moved toward the front desk, her movements careful and deliberate, as if she were trying to take up as little space as possible. The librarian began pulling books from various shelves, chattering away about plots and authors. Xavier listened with half an ear, his attention focused on Josephine as she checked out her book and moved toward the door. She was going to leave without saying a word, without acknowledging his presence at all. Something in Xavier rebelled at that thought. "Excuse me," he said, more loudly than necessary. Both women turned to look at him. "Miss, you dropped this." He held out a handkerchief he had pulled from his pocket, fully aware that it was his own and that she had dropped nothing. It was a transparent ploy, and he half expected her to call him on it. Instead, Josephine looked at the handkerchief, then at him, confusion clear on her face. "That is not mine. Are you sure? I saw it fall when you reached for that book. I am certain." Her voice was soft but firm, with an edge of something that might have been amusement. "That handkerchief is clearly yours. I can see the initials embroidered in the corner. XR." Xavier looked down at the handkerchief and felt heat creep up his neck. She was right, of course. His sister had made it for him years ago, before he had left home. "My mistake," he said, meeting her eyes again. "Apologies." For just a moment something passed between them, recognition perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. Then Josephine nodded once and slipped out the door, leaving Xavier standing there feeling like a fool. The librarian cleared her throat, drawing his attention back. "She is a nice woman," she said quietly. "Comes in here every week without fail. Reads more than anyone else in this town, I would wager." Xavier carefully folded the handkerchief and returned it to his pocket. "What does she do? For work, I mean." "Sewing mostly. Mending and alterations. She does beautiful work, very precise, takes in laundry too when times are lean." The librarian selected 3 books and brought them to the desk. "These should suit you. Adventure stories, all of them. Plenty of action to keep you interested." Xavier accepted the books, though he barely glanced at the titles. His mind was elsewhere, turning over this new information. Josephine Edwards supported herself through manual labor, the kind of work that was endless and exhausting and never paid quite enough. She lived alone in that small house, overlooked by everyone, and still she found joy in things like books and gardens and birds building nests. There was a strength in that, Xavier realized. A quiet resilience that most people would never see, because they refuse to look past their own prejudices and judgments. He thanked the librarian and headed back to his wagon, but instead of leaving town immediately, he found himself driving slowly past Josephine's house. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across her garden, illuminating rows of vegetables and herbs planted with mathematical precision. Tomato plants climbed stakes, their green fruit just beginning to show color. Bean plants twined around poles. Squash sprawled across one corner, their broad leaves creating patches of shade. It was the garden of someone who depended on it for survival, Xavier realized. Every inch of space was utilized, every plant chosen for its productivity. This was not a hobby. It was necessity. The front door opened, and Josephine emerged carrying a basket. She moved through the garden with practiced ease, checking plants, pulling weeds, collecting vegetables. Xavier knew he should leave, knew that sitting here watching her crossed some line of propriety, but he could not seem to make himself drive away. Then she looked up, and their eyes met across the distance. Xavier froze, caught in the act of observing her. He expected anger or fear, or at the very least discomfort. Instead, Josephine simply stood there, her expression unreadable. They stayed that way for what felt like an eternity but was probably only a few seconds. Finally, Xavier tipped his hat in greeting. It was a small gesture, the kind men made to women all the time. But from the way Josephine's eyes widened, he might as well have declared his intentions in the town square. She recovered quickly, dipping her head in acknowledgement before turning back to her garden. Xavier took that as his cue to leave. He urged the horses forward, already composing the lecture he was going to give himself on the ride back to the ranch. But as the wagon rolled down the dusty street, Xavier could not quite bring himself to regret what he had done. He had seen her, truly seen her, and he had made sure she knew it. It was a small thing, insignificant in the grand scheme of life. Yet somehow it felt like the most important thing he had done in years. The following week, Xavier told himself he was not going to seek her out. He would conduct his business in town like a normal person, purchase his supplies, and head straight back to the ranch. No detours, no lingering, no standing outside libraries or driving past houses like some lovesick fool. That plan lasted exactly as long as it took him to finish loading supplies into his wagon. Then, as if his body had a mind of its own, Xavier found his feet carrying him down Main Street toward the dress shop, where he had overheard Josephine sometimes delivered mending. He was still trying to come up with an excuse for being there when the door to the shop opened and Josephine stepped out, nearly colliding with him. She stumbled backward, dropping the basket she had been carrying. Fabric scraps and thread spools scattered across the wooden walkway. "I am so sorry," Xavier said, immediately dropping to his knees to help gather her things. "I was not watching where I was going." "It is fine," Josephine replied, her voice tight. She knelt beside him, her movements quick and efficient as she collected the scattered items. "No harm done." Up close, Xavier could see details he had missed from a distance. The fine lines at the corners of her eyes that spoke of too many nights squinting in lamplight. The calluses on her fingers from years of needle work. The careful patches on her dress, so expertly done they were nearly invisible. Their hands brushed as they both reached for the same spool of thread, and Xavier felt an electric jolt run up his arm. Josephine must have felt it too, because she pulled back as if burned. "Here," Xavier said, gathering the last few items and placing them carefully in her basket. "I think that is everything. Thank you." Josephine stood, clutching the basket to her chest like a shield. She looked at him properly for the first time, and Xavier saw wariness in her eyes mixed with something else. Curiosity, maybe. "You are the man from the library last week." "Xavier Reeves," he said, removing his hat. "I work at the Patterson Ranch, I know. I have seen you in town." She paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. "You are always watching me." The directness of it caught Xavier off guard. Most women would have danced around such an observation, approached it sideways with hints and implications. But Josephine Edwards apparently had no time for such games. "I am," he admitted, seeing no point in denying it. "I apologize if that has made you uncomfortable. That was not my intention." "What was your intention?" Xavier struggled for an answer. What could he say? That she fascinated him. That he could not stop thinking about the contrast between the invisible woman everyone else saw and the vibrant person he observed. That something about her quiet strength called to something in him he had not known existed. "I wanted to see you," he finally said, the simple truth. "Really see you, not look through you like everyone else does." Josephine went very still. "Why?" "Because you deserve to be seen." The words hung in the air between them. Josephine stared at him, her expression cycling through disbelief, suspicion, and something that might have been hope before settling on cautious neutrality. "I should go," she said. "I have work to finish." "Wait." Xavier spoke without thinking, reaching out as if to stop her before dropping his hand. "Would you let me buy you lunch? There is a restaurant just down the street. Nothing fancy, but the food is decent." "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I would like to talk to you." To actually talk to you, not just watch from a distance like some kind of fool. Josephine looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for something. Mockery, perhaps, or pity. Xavier made sure she would find neither. Whatever this was between them, it was genuine, even if he did not fully understand it himself. "People will talk," she finally said. "Let them. You do not understand. You are new here. You do not know what it is like, what they say about me." "I have heard some of it," Xavier said carefully. "And I do not care. You should." Her voice was bitter now, years of hurt bleeding through. "Being associated with me will not do you any favors in this town." "I am not concerned with favors. I am concerned with having lunch with an interesting woman." If you are not interested, then say so, and I will leave you alone. But if your only objection is what other people might think or say, well, I have never put much stock in other people's opinions." Josephine shifted her basket to one hip, her expression thoughtful. Xavier could practically see the debate happening behind her eyes, the part of her that wanted to say yes warring with the part that had learned to expect disappointment and humiliation. "One lunch," she finally said, "but somewhere quiet, not the main restaurant. There is a small cafe near the edge of town. Mrs. Chen runs it. She serves good food, and she minds her own business." "That sounds perfect." They walked side by side down the street, maintaining a respectful distance that somehow felt more intimate than if they had been touching. Xavier was acutely aware of every sideways glance they received, every whisper that followed in their wake. He could only imagine what it felt like for Josephine, who had endured years of such scrutiny. But she held her head high, her spine straight, and matched his pace without hesitation. Whatever fear or anxiety she felt, she refused to show it. Mrs. Chen's cafe was a small establishment tucked between a leather goods shop and a boarding house. The owner, a woman of indeterminate age with sharp eyes and a warm smile, greeted them with a nod and showed them to a table near the back. "Tea?" she asked, already moving toward the kitchen. "Please," Josephine said, settling into her chair with visible relief. "And whatever the daily special is." "Make that too," Xavier added. Once they were alone, silence settled over the table. Xavier found himself suddenly nervous, uncertain how to begin. What did one say to a woman they had been watching for weeks, but had never actually conversed with? Josephine seemed to sense his discomfort. "You said you work at the Patterson Ranch. How long have you been there?" "About 2 months now. Tom Patterson hired me to help with the spring branding and stayed me on through the summer. The work is good, and he treats his men fairly. That is more than can be said for some ranchers around here." She paused as Mrs. Chen returned with tea and cups. "Where are you from originally?" "Texas, mostly. Grew up on a small ranch outside of Austin. Spent the last decade or so moving around, working different places. Colorado, Kansas, a few months in Montana." "That sounds exciting," Xavier shrugged. "Lonely, more like." "It is one thing to see new places, another to never have a place to belong." He took a sip of tea, grateful for something to do with his hands. "What about you? Have you always lived in Independence, born and raised?" "My parents had a small farm about 5 miles from town. They died when I was 19, cholera outbreak. The farm went to pay debts and I moved into town." She said it matter-of-factly, but Xavier heard the grief underneath. "That was 9 years ago. I am sorry. It was a long time ago." She stared into her tea, watching the steam rise. "Though sometimes it feels like yesterday." Mrs. Chen returned with 2 plates of food. Roasted chicken with vegetables and rice, simple but fragrant. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Xavier spoke again. "The librarian told me you do sewing work." "Mending and alterations, mostly. Some new garments when people commission them. It is enough to get by." Josephine set down her fork. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you really here? Men do not usually pay attention to women like me unless they want something." "So what is it you want?" Her bluntness was refreshing, even if the question itself cut close to the bone. Xavier set down his own fork and met her eyes. "Honestly, I do not entirely know. There is just something about you that I cannot seem to shake. The way you move through the world with such dignity despite how people treat you. The joy on your face when you were looking at those books in the library. The care you put into your garden. You are real in a way that most people are not, and I find that compelling." Josephine looked at him skeptically. "That is quite the pretty speech." "It is the truth. Men have told me pretty truths before. They usually turn out to be lies. Xavier thought about the gossip he had overheard about someone named Thornton and a humiliation from 10 years ago. "What happened?" he asked gently. "With the Thornton boy, I mean, if you do not mind me asking." Josephine's expression shuddered. "So you have heard about that?" "Only pieces. Gossip from busybodies who seem to have nothing better to do than dissect other people's lives." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Benjamin Thornton. He was 20, I was 18. We had known each other our whole lives, and I thought we were friends. More than friends, maybe, or at least that is what I let myself believe." She paused, gathering her thoughts. Xavier waited patiently, not pushing. "He started courting me. Small things at first, walking me home from church, helping with chores around my parents' farm. I thought he genuinely cared for me. Then one day he invited me to a dance. Said he wanted everyone to know we were together. I was so happy, so stupidly, naively happy." Her voice had gone quiet, and Xavier had to lean forward to hear her. "I spent what little money we had on a new dress. My mother helped me make it. Blue calico, the prettiest thing I had ever owned. I was so excited that I arrived at the dance hall early. I wanted to be there when he came, wanted to see his face when he saw me all dressed up." Xavier's stomach twisted, already anticipating where this story was going. He never came. Instead, his friends were there, and they were all laughing. Laughing at me. One of them finally took pity and told me the truth. Benjamin had never intended to take me to the dance. It was all a joke, a bet between him and his friends. They wanted to see if they could make the plain farm girl fall for him, wanted to see how far I would go. "Josephine," Xavier said softly, aching for the young woman she had been. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was that Benjamin showed up later with another girl, Caroline something. Beautiful, wealthy, visiting from Kansas City. He danced with her all night while I stood there in my blue calico dress, and everyone could see exactly what I was. A fool. A laughingstock. Someone so desperate for affection that she fell for the first man who showed her any attention. That is not what you were. That is what he was. A cruel boy playing cruel games. Maybe. But it did not matter. After that night I was marked. The woman who threw herself at a man and got rejected. The woman who did not know her place. No decent man would court me after that, and the indecent ones, well. They thought I would be easy prey, given my desperation. She met his eyes. "So forgive me if I am suspicious of your intentions, Mr. Reeves. I learned a long time ago that when something seems too good to be true, it usually is." Xavier sat back, processing everything she had told him. The casual cruelty of it made him furious. Not just Benjamin Thornton's actions, though those were bad enough, but the way the entire town had chosen to define Josephine by that single moment. The way they had taken a young woman's heartbreak and used it as an excuse to ostracize her, to render her invisible. "I am not Benjamin Thornton," he said firmly. "And I am not here to play games or make bets or humiliate you. I am here because I see you, Josephine Edwards. I see your strength and your kindness and your resilience, and I would like the chance to know you better if you will allow it." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Why?" "Because loneliness recognizes loneliness. Because I am tired of drifting through life without connection. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth knowing." He paused. "And because I think maybe you are tired of being invisible." Tears gathered in Josephine's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I do not know if I can trust this." "Trust you? Then do not. Not yet. Let me earn it. Have lunch with me again next Saturday, and the Saturday after that. Let me prove that I mean what I say. And if people talk, they will talk regardless. The question is whether you are going to let their talk dictate your life." Josephine was quiet for a long time, absently turning her teacup in her hands. Outside, the sounds of the town filtered in. Wagon wheels on dirt, voices calling greetings. The normal rhythms of life in Independence, Missouri. "All right," she finally said. "Next Saturday." "But I am not making any promises beyond that." Relief flooded through Xavier, so intense it surprised him. "That is all I ask." They finished their meal, the conversation turning to lighter topics. Books Josephine had read, places Xavier had traveled, the proper way to grow tomatoes. Small talk, the kind that new acquaintances exchange, but beneath it ran an undercurrent of something deeper. Understanding, perhaps. Or the beginning of it. When they parted ways outside the cafe, Xavier tipped his hat and Josephine nodded in return, and that small gesture felt like a victory. The ride back to the ranch seemed shorter than usual. Xavier's mind was occupied with replaying every moment of their conversation, analyzing every word and expression. By the time he arrived, he had committed it all to memory. Tom Patterson took one look at his face and grinned. "Well now. Looks like town was more interesting than usual today." "Just ran some errands," Xavier said, trying for casual and probably failing. "Uh-huh. And did these errands involve a certain young woman?" Xavier stopped mid-stride. "How did you know about that?" "Son, I have been alive a lot longer than you. I recognize that look. You have gone and gotten yourself interested in someone." Tom leaned against the barn door, his expression turning more serious. "Just be careful. This town can be cruel to people who do not fit their narrow definitions of acceptable. So I am learning. I am guessing you are talking about Josephine Edwards. Good woman, that one. Works hard, keeps to herself. Shame what happened to her all those years ago. You know about that?" "Everyone knows about that, and everyone has an opinion on it, most of them wrong." Tom shook his head. "People in this town decided who she was based on one bad night, and they have refused to let her be anything else. It is a damn shame." "Well, I am not most people." "No, I do not reckon you are." Tom clapped him on the shoulder. "Just remember that caring for someone who is invisible to everyone else means you become visible too. Make sure you are ready for that." Xavier thought about Josephine's warnings, about the whispers he had already heard following them through town. "I am ready." "Good. Then you had better get those horses tended to before supper. Maria is making stew tonight, and she gets testy when people are late to the table." The week that followed was the longest of Xavier's life. He went through the motions of his work, mending fences and checking cattle and doing all the tasks required of a ranch hand, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept replaying moments from his conversation with Josephine, analyzing his own reactions, planning what he might say when he saw her again. Tom noticed, of course. The old rancher seemed to find Xavier's distraction endlessly amusing, making sly comments that sent the other ranch hands into fits of laughter. But there was no real malice in it, and Xavier took the ribbing in stride. Finally, Saturday arrived. Xavier woke before dawn, restless with anticipation. He went through his morning chores with unusual speed, then took extra care with his appearance, changing his shirt twice before settling on his least worn one. He even attempted to tame his hair, though the stubborn waves refused to cooperate. By the time he climbed onto the wagon, Tom was openly laughing. Never seen a man so nervous about going to town for supplies. "I am not nervous." "Sure you are not. That is why you have checked your reflection in every shiny surface for the past hour." Xavier did not dignify that with a response. He urged the horses forward, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. The ride to Independence seemed to take forever. Xavier's mind conjured a dozen scenarios, ranging from Josephine having changed her mind to her not being there at all to the whole thing having been some elaborate joke he was too foolish to see. But when he finally made it to town and completed his errands, he found her waiting outside Mrs. Chen's cafe, exactly as they had discussed. She wore a different dress today, still worn but clean and carefully mended, and her hair was pinned back from her face. "You came," she said, and he heard the surprise in her voice. "Did you think I would not? I considered the possibility." "Well, I am here, and I am hungry. Shall we?" This lunch was easier than the first. They fell into conversation more naturally, discovering shared opinions on everything from the proper temperature for tea to whether summer storms were exhilarating or terrifying. Josephine had a dry sense of humor that caught Xavier off guard, making him laugh more than he had in months. "You should do that more often," she said at one point. "Do what?" "Laugh. It suits you." Xavier felt warmth creep up his neck. "I could say the same about you. When you smile, really smile, your whole face lights up." Josephine ducked her head, but not before he saw her own flush of pleasure. "You are quite the flatterer, Mr. Reeves." "Xavier, please. And I am only stating facts." They lingered over their meal longer than necessary, reluctant for the afternoon to end. When they finally parted ways, Xavier felt lighter somehow, as if a weight he had not known he was carrying had been lifted. The following weeks fell into a pattern. Every Saturday, Xavier would complete his errands and then meet Josephine at Mrs. Chen's cafe. They would share a meal and conversation, learning about each other in small increments. He discovered that she had a passion for astronomy, often staying up late to watch the stars. She learned that he had a younger sister back in Texas, whom he wrote to every month without fail. Slowly, carefully, trust began to build between them. Josephine started to relax in his presence, the wariness in her eyes gradually fading. And Xavier found himself opening up in ways he never had before, sharing stories and thoughts he had kept locked away for years. It was not always easy. There were moments when Josephine would retreat behind her walls, when something would remind her of past hurts and she would shut down. Xavier learned to recognize those moments, to give her space while making it clear he was not going anywhere, and the town noticed. How could they not? Every Saturday, for nearly 2 months, Xavier Reeves and Josephine Edwards could be found having lunch together. The gossips had a field day with it. What can he possibly see in her? Mrs. Abernathy wondered loudly in the general store, making sure her voice carried. "Maybe he does not know any better," someone else suggested. "He is new to town, after all. Someone should warn him. Tell him about her history." But no one did, perhaps because Xavier's reputation as a hard worker and honest man had already been established. Or perhaps because Tom Patterson, who was well respected in the community, made it known that he approved of the match. Xavier heard the whispers but ignored them. What mattered was Josephine and the way she had started to bloom under the steady attention. She smiled more easily now, held her head a little higher, met people's eyes instead of looking through them. One Saturday in late August, Xavier took a risk. Instead of heading straight to Mrs. Chen's cafe, he stopped at the general store and purchased a bolt of blue calico fabric. Then he went to the cafe and waited, the fabric wrapped in brown paper beside him. When Josephine arrived, she looked at the package with curiosity. "What is that?" "A gift." "For you." She sat down slowly, not reaching for the package. "Xavier, I cannot accept gifts from you." "Why not?" "Because accepting gifts from a man suggests intentions, expectations. And if I have intentions, if I have expectations—" Josephine went very still. "What are you saying?" Xavier took a deep breath. This was it, the moment he had been building toward for weeks. "I am saying that these Saturday lunches have been the highlight of my week, that I think about you constantly, that I would like to formally court you if you would allow it." "Court me," she repeated as if testing the words. "Xavier, you could have any woman in this town, women who are younger, prettier, without complicated histories following them around." I do not want any woman in this town, I want you. Why? It was the same question she had asked that first day, but this time Xavier had a better answer. Because you are strong and kind and funny. Because you see beauty in small things. Because you have survived things that would have broken weaker people, and you are still capable of joy. Because when I am with you, I feel like I have finally found what I have been looking for all these years. Tears spilled down Josephine's cheeks. You do not know what you are asking. Being with me will make your life harder. People will judge you, question your judgment. Make assumptions about what kind of man would want someone like me. Let them. I stopped caring about other people's assumptions a long time ago. He pushed the package across the table. Please, open it. With trembling hands, Josephine unwrapped the brown paper. When she saw the blue calico inside, she gasped, her fingers tracing the pattern. This is the fabric from the mercantile, the one I was looking at that day. I saw you looking at it, saw how much you wanted it. I thought maybe you could make yourself a new dress, one chosen for joy, not necessity. Xavier. Her voice broke on his name. This is too much. It is not nearly enough. Say yes, Josephine. Let me court you properly. Let me show you how you deserve to be treated. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she finally nodded. Yes, all right. Yes. Relief and joy surged through Xavier so powerfully he felt dizzy with it. He reached across the table and took her hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit in his. You will not regret this, I promise. I hope you are right. From that day forward, Xavier made sure the entire town knew his intentions. He walked with Josephine openly through the streets, his hand on her elbow. He called on her at her home, sitting properly in her small parlor and talking until late in the evening. He brought her flowers from the meadows near the ranch, wildflowers that cost nothing but spoke volumes. The town's reaction was mixed. Some people, like Tom Patterson and Mrs. Chen, offered their support and approval. Others, like Mrs. Abernathy and her circle, made their disapproval clear through pointed comments and cold shoulders. Xavier did not care. He was falling in love, and everything else seemed insignificant by comparison. Josephine was more cautious, her years of hurt making her slow to fully trust. But Xavier could see her defenses gradually lowering. She laughed more freely now, touched his hand without flinching, let him see her joy and her fears without trying to hide them. One evening in September, Xavier arrived at her house for their usual visit to find her in the garden, harvesting the last of the summer vegetables. He stood at the gate, watching her work, struck by how beautiful she looked in the golden evening light. Are you going to stand there all night, or are you going to help? She called without turning around. Xavier laughed and joined her among the plants. How did you know I was here? I always know when you are nearby, I feel it. She glanced at him, a smile playing at her lips. Is that strange? No, I feel it too. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, filling her basket with tomatoes and peppers and squash. When they were finished, Josephine straightened, stretching her back. Would you like to stay for supper? It is nothing fancy, just vegetable stew and cornbread. I would love that. It was the first time she had invited him to share a meal in her home, and Xavier recognized the significance of it. This was her private space, her refuge from the world, allowing him immense something. Inside, her house was small but immaculate. Every surface was clean, every item in its place. Books lined a shelf near the window. Sewing projects sat in careful stacks on a side table. The blue calico dress he had given her fabric for hung on a peg near the door, finished and beautiful. You made it, Xavier said, touching the fabric gently. I finished it last week. I have not had occasion to wear it yet. Wear it to the harvest festival next month. Come with me. Josephine turned from where she had been preparing the stew. The Harvest Festival, Xavier, that is a major social event. Everyone will be there. Exactly. I want to dance with you in that blue dress and make it clear to everyone that we are together, that I choose you. People will talk. They already talk. At least this way we will give them something worth talking about. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right. We will go to the Harvest Festival. The weeks leading up to the festival passed in a blur of work and anticipation. Xavier counted down the days, impatient to show the world what everyone else seemed determined to ignore, that Josephine Edwards was remarkable. Tom Patterson noticed his distraction and ribbed him mercilessly about it. Never seen a man so eager for a festival. You planning to win her a prize at the shooting competition? I had not thought about it, but that is not a bad idea. Just do not get so focused on impressing her that you forget to actually enjoy yourself. Festivals are supposed to be fun. I am sure it will be. Xavier paused in his work. Tom, can I ask you something? Course. You have known Josephine longer than I have. What do you really think about all this? About us? Tom leaned on his shovel, considering the question. I think you are both lucky to have found each other. I think she deserves someone who sees her worth, and you deserve someone who appreciates your loyalty. I think the people who have a problem with it are revealing more about themselves than about either of you. Even though she is older than most unmarried women, even with her history. Son, let me tell you something I learned a long time ago. Age is just a number, and history is just a story. What matters is who someone is right now in this moment. And right now, Josephine Edwards is a good woman who has been treated badly by this town. If you are man enough to see past all that nonsense, then you are a better man than most. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. Now stop worrying and get back to work. Those fences will not mend themselves. The night of the Harvest Festival arrived clear and cool, perfect autumn weather. Xavier dressed in his best clothes, such as they were, and made the ride into town with his heart pounding. He had arranged to meet Josephine at her house, wanting to walk with her to the festival grounds. When she opened the door, Xavier forgot how to breathe. The blue calico dress transformed her, bringing out the color in her eyes and the roses in her cheeks. She had done something different with her hair, pinning it up in a way that revealed the graceful line of her neck. You are beautiful, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Josephine blushed, pleasure and embarrassment warring on her face. You do not look so bad yourself. Shall we? He offered his arm and she took it, her hand trembling slightly. They walked through the twilight streets toward the fairgrounds, where lanterns had been strung between trees and tables groaned under the weight of food. Music drifted on the air, fiddles and guitars playing lively tunes. People milled about in clusters, talking and laughing. Xavier felt Josephine tense as they approached, saw her instinct to fade into the background reasserting itself. He covered her hand with his own, a silent reassurance. We do not have to stay if you do not want to, he murmured. No. I want to be here. With you. They entered the festival grounds together, and Xavier watched as heads turned, as whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. He kept his expression neutral, his posture relaxed, making it clear through body language alone that he was completely comfortable with his choice of companion. Tom Patterson appeared almost immediately, his wife Maria at his side. Xavier, Miss Edwards, glad you could make it. Maria has been saving some of her famous apple pie for you both. That is very kind, Josephine said, relaxing slightly at the warm welcome. Nonsense. You are practically family at this point. Maria linked her arm through Josephine's. Come on, dear, let me introduce you to some people. Xavier watched as Maria led Josephine away, grateful for the older woman's kindness. Tom grinned at him. Do not worry. Maria will take good care of her. She has been looking forward to this all week. Looking forward to what? to helping Josephine feel like she belongs. Maria has always had a soft spot for people the town overlooks. Says it reminds her of when we first moved here 30 years ago. We were outsiders too back then. As the evening progressed, Xavier began to relax. While there were certainly people who shot disapproving looks their way, there were others who went out of their way to be welcoming. The librarian stopped by to chat about books. Mrs. Chen brought them plates of food. Several of Tom's ranch hands greeted Josephine respectfully, tipping their hats and smiling. Slowly, Xavier watched as Josephine transformed. The invisible woman faded away, replaced by someone vibrant and alive. She laughed at jokes, contributed to conversations, and even danced when Xavier led her to the area where couples were swaying to music. "Having fun?" he asked as they moved together. "More than I have had in years," she admitted. "Thank you for this, for all of this." "You do not have to thank me. I am exactly where I want to be." They danced several more songs, lost in their own world. Xavier was vaguely aware of the crowd around them, of the various reactions their presence was generating, but he could not bring himself to care. All that mattered was the woman in his arms, the way she fit against him as if she had been made for this exact purpose. When the music slowed to a ballad, Xavier pulled her closer. Josephine rested her head against his shoulder, and he felt her sigh of contentment. "I could stay like this forever," she murmured. "Then let's try." She pulled back to look at him, questions in her eyes. But before she could voice them, a commotion near the edge of the festival grounds drew their attention. A man was striding toward them, his face flushed with anger or alcohol or both. Xavier recognized him from around town but did not know his name. Well, if it is not the town spinster, all dressed up and pretending to be respectable. Xavier felt Josephine stiffen in his arms. He stepped slightly in front of her, his posture shifting to something more protective. "Move along, friend. We are not bothering anyone." "Friend," the man laughed, a harsh sound. "I am not your friend, and I am not going to stand by and watch while you make a fool of yourself over her. Someone needs to tell you the truth about Josephine Edwards. I know everything I need to know. Do you? Do you know that she threw herself at Benjamin Thornton like a common whore? Do you know that she is so desperate for male attention that she will spread her legs for anyone who shows her the slightest bit of kindness?" Xavier moved before he consciously decided to, his fist connecting with the man's jaw with a satisfying crack. The man stumbled backward, landing hard in the dirt. The music stopped, conversation died. Everyone turned to stare. Xavier stood over the fallen man, his chest heaving with rage. "You will not speak about her that way, not now, not ever. If I hear that you have said one more disrespectful word about Josephine, I will finish what I started here. Do you understand me?" The man scrambled to his feet, holding his jaw. Blood trickled from his split lip. "You are going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not hitting you harder." Tom Patterson appeared, positioning himself between Xavier and the other man. "I think you had better leave, Johnson, before this gets any worse." Johnson glared at all of them but eventually slunk away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the festival lights. The crowd stood frozen, unsure how to react. Then, slowly, the music started again, and people began to drift back to their conversations, though many eyes remained fixed on Xavier and Josephine. Xavier turned to find Josephine standing exactly where he had left her, her face pale and her hands trembling. "I am sorry," he said. "I should not have lost my temper like that. You defended me." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You actually defended me. Of course I did. I told you I will not tolerate anyone speaking about you that way. But do you realize what you have done? Everyone saw. Everyone knows. Your reputation in this town is going to be affected by this. I do not care about my reputation. I care about you." He took her hands in his, no longer caring who was watching. "I love you, Josephine. I think I have loved you since that first day I saw you in the mercantile window, and I will defend you against anyone who tries to diminish you." Tears streamed down her face. "You love me. I love you. With everything I am. I love you too." The words tumbled out as if she had been holding them back for too long. "I love you so much it terrifies me." Xavier pulled her into his arms, holding her close as she cried against his chest. Around them, the festival continued, but they were in their own world, finally admitting what had been building between them for months. When Josephine finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "Take me home. Are you sure? We could stay. I am sure. I have had enough of crowds for one night. I just want to be with you." They walked back to her house hand in hand, the sounds of the festival fading behind them. Inside, Xavier lit the lamps while Josephine put on water for tea. They moved around each other with easy familiarity, comfortable in the shared space. "You really not care?" Josephine asked once they were settled in her small parlor. "About what people think? I really do not." "Josephine, I have spent my whole life drifting from place to place, never quite fitting in anywhere. But with you, I feel like I have found home. Why would I give that up because some small-minded people cannot see what I see? And what do you see?" "I see a woman who has survived more than most people could handle, who creates beauty in the form of gardens and dresses and kindness to strangers who do not even notice her, who reads books about distant places and dreams bigger than this small town. I see someone strong and brave and absolutely worthy of love. I am not brave. I have been hiding for 10 years. You have been surviving. There is a difference, but you do not have to hide anymore, not if you do not want to." Josephine set down her tea and moved closer to him on the small sofa. "Xavier, if we continue down this path, if we make this real, there is no going back. People will always remember, always judge. Let them. As long as I have you, I can face anything." She kissed him then, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened into something more. Xavier wrapped his arms around her, pouring everything he felt into that kiss. Love and longing and promise and hope. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Josephine smiled. "So what happens now? Now I court you properly. I call on you regularly. I escort you to church and social events. And when enough time has passed, I ask you to marry me." That sounds like a plan. Does it? Good. Because I have already decided that you are going to be my wife. I just wanted to give you time to catch up to that conclusion. Josephine laughed, the sound joyful and free. "That confident are you, when it comes to us?" "Absolutely." The autumn months passed quickly after that night. True to his word, Xavier courted Josephine with single-minded determination. He called on her 3 times a week, bringing flowers and vegetables from the ranch garden and stories about his day. They took long walks through the countryside, talking about everything and nothing. He read to her from her library books in the evenings, his deep voice bringing adventures to life. The town slowly adjusted to their relationship. Some people never would accept it, like Mrs. Abernathy and her circle of gossips. But others began to see what Xavier saw, that Josephine Edwards was a remarkable woman who had been overlooked for far too long. Business for Josephine's sewing actually increased during this time. Women who had previously taken their mending elsewhere began to seek her out, perhaps curious about the woman who had captured the attention of the handsome cowboy. Josephine's skillful work spoke for itself, and soon she had more clients than she could handle. Xavier watched this transformation with satisfaction. This was what he had wanted for her all along: to be seen, to be valued, to step out of the shadows and claim her rightful place. Winter came early that year, with the first snow falling in mid-November. Xavier made the decision to stay on at the Patterson Ranch through the winter rather than moving on as he usually did. Tom was pleased, already considering Xavier more partner than employee. One cold December evening, Xavier sat in Josephine's parlor, watching her sew by lamplight. The scene was so peaceful, so domestic, that it made his heart ache with wanting. "Marry me," he said, the words escaping before he had planned them. Josephine looked up, her needle frozen mid-stitch. "What, marry me? I know we have only known each other for 6 months, and I know people will say we are moving too fast, but I do not care. I love you. I want to build a life with you. I want to come home to you every night and wake up beside you every morning. I want to grow old with you. So marry me." She set down her sewing carefully, her hands trembling. "Xavier, are you sure, really sure? Because once we marry, that is it. You will be tied to me forever, tied to my reputation, my history." "I am counting on it. Josephine, you are not your history. You are not what happened 10 years ago. You are the woman who took a chance on a drifter cowboy, who taught him what it means to have a home, who showed him that love is worth the risk." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes, oh yes, I will marry you." Xavier crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and passion he possessed. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and laughing at once. "I do not have a ring," Xavier admitted, "but I will get you one, the prettiest ring in Independence." "I do not need a ring, I just need you. You will have both, I promise." They married on a cold January morning in 1879, with Tom and Maria Patterson serving as witnesses. The ceremony was small, held in the simple church where Josephine had worshipped her entire life. Some townspeople attended, curious or supportive or both. Others stayed away, their disapproval clear. Xavier did not notice any of it. His attention was focused entirely on Josephine, who wore the blue calico dress and looked more beautiful than he had ever seen her. When they exchanged vows, his voice was steady and sure. This was right. This was meant to be. The kiss they shared at the end of the ceremony was chaste, appropriate for church, but it held the promise of everything to come. As they walked back down the aisle together, Josephine no longer invisible but radiant with joy, Xavier felt something settle deep in his chest. This was home. She was home. Tom had offered them the use of a small cabin on the ranch property, a place that had been empty for years. Over the past month, Xavier and some of the other ranch hands had worked to make it livable, repairing the roof and chimney, fixing broken windows, building new furniture. It was not much, but it was theirs. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered confessions and gentle explorations. Xavier took his time, wanting Josephine's first experience to be everything it should be. When she finally fell asleep in his arms, her head resting on his chest and her hand over his heart, Xavier stared at the ceiling and marveled at how drastically his life had changed. 6 months ago, he had been a drifter with no ties and no future. Now he had a wife, a home, a purpose. And all because he had taken the time to really see someone everyone else had overlooked. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. Xavier continued working at the Patterson Ranch, putting in long hours and hard work. But now he had something to come home to. Josephine would be waiting in their cabin, a warm meal prepared and a welcoming smile on her face. She continued her sewing work, taking in mending and making new garments for the growing list of clients. Xavier was proud of how she had built this small business, proud of her skill and determination. They talked often about their dreams for the future. Xavier wanted to save enough money to buy his own piece of land, maybe start a small ranch. Josephine wanted a bigger house with room for children and a library of her own. Together, they began planning and saving, working toward a future that felt bright with possibility. The town's attitude toward them gradually shifted. People who had been cold or dismissive began to warm up, particularly as they saw how happy and stable the marriage was. Xavier and Josephine became known as a reliable, hardworking couple. People stopped defining Josephine by her past and started seeing her for who she was in the present. Mrs. Abernathy and her circle never fully came around, but even their power to hurt diminished over time. When the gossips tried to stir up old stories, others would shut them down, pointing out that Josephine was a married woman now, a respected member of the community. Spring arrived, bringing new life to the land. Josephine planted a garden outside their cabin, working the soil with the same care and precision she brought to everything she did. Xavier helped when he could, enjoying the peaceful evenings spent working side by side. One warm May evening, as they sat on their small porch watching the sunset, Josephine turned to him with a shy smile. "I have something to tell you." Xavier set down the piece of leather he had been working on. "What is it?" "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." Joy exploded through Xavier's chest. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. I have suspected for a few weeks now, but I wanted to be certain before I told you. A baby." Xavier pulled back to look at her face, seeing the happiness and nervousness there. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" "Happy, Josephine, I am beyond happy. I am amazed, grateful, terrified, all of it at once." She laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I am terrified too, but also so excited. I never thought I would have this. A husband, a home, a family. For so long, I believed that life had passed me by. It did not pass you by. It was just waiting for the right moment." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. Josephine continued her sewing work, though Xavier insisted she take on fewer clients as her belly grew. He fussed over her constantly, much to her amusement, making sure she ate enough and rested enough and did not overwork herself. Tom and Maria were thrilled at the news, treating the coming baby as if it were their own grandchild. Maria spent hours with Josephine, teaching her about childbirth and infant care, sharing stories from when her own children had been small. As winter approached again, Xavier found himself filled with anticipation and anxiety. He wanted this baby so much, wanted to meet the little person who was part him and part Josephine. But he also worried about the birth itself, about all the things that could go wrong. Josephine sensed his worry and tried to reassure him. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine. I know, I just cannot help worrying. You are precious to me, both of you are. We will be fine. We have Maria to help and the doctor if needed. Everything will be all right." Their son was born on a frigid February morning in 1880, arriving with a lusty cry that filled their small cabin. Xavier, who had been pacing outside while Maria and the midwife attended to Josephine, rushed in at the sound. Josephine lay exhausted against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale. But she was smiling, holding a small bundle wrapped in blankets. "Come meet your son." Xavier approached on shaking legs, overwhelmed by the enormity of the moment. When he looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets, something in his chest cracked open. Love, fierce and protective and all-consuming, flooded through him. "He is perfect," Xavier whispered, gently touching the baby's impossibly small hand. Tiny fingers wrapped around his, gripping tight. "He has your eyes," Josephine said softly. "Look at how alert he is already." They named him Thomas after Tom Patterson, with James as a middle name for Josephine's father. Little Thomas was a good baby, quiet and observant, watching the world with those serious eyes. Xavier threw himself into fatherhood with the same determination he brought to everything else. He learned to change nappies and soothe cries and rock his son to sleep. He would hold Thomas for hours, just watching him sleep, marveling at the tiny human he and Josephine had created. The town rallied around them after the birth. Women brought food and baby clothes. Tom gave Xavier time off to help Josephine recover. Even some of the people who had been cold to them before softened, won over by the sight of the young family. Josephine flourished as a mother. The joy she took in their son was evident in everything she did. She sang to him while she worked, told him stories, pointed out birds and clouds and all the wonders of the world around them. "I never knew I could be this happy," she told Xavier one evening as they sat together, watching Thomas play with his toes. "There were so many years when I felt invisible, when I thought my life was over before it really began. And now look at us. A husband who loves me, a beautiful son, a home of our own. It feels like a dream." "It is real," Xavier assured her, pulling her close. "This is our life, our family. And it is only going to get better." And it did. Over the next few years, their life together deepened and grew. Xavier saved enough money to make a down payment on a small piece of land adjacent to the Patterson Ranch. With Tom's help and blessing, he began building their own homestead. The house he built was modest but sturdy, with 3 bedrooms and a large kitchen. He made sure there was space for Josephine's sewing work and a small room that could serve as a library. Every nail he drove, every board he placed, was an act of love. They moved into the new house in the spring of 1882 when Thomas was 2 years old. Josephine stood in the empty rooms, tears streaming down her face. "You built this for us. You actually built us a house. I told you I would give you everything you dreamed of. This is just the beginning." Their daughter, Margaret Maria, arrived that fall, named for both their mothers. She was the opposite of her serious brother, all smiles and laughter from the moment she entered the world. Thomas took to his baby sister immediately, wanting to help with everything from feeding to diaper changes. Life on their small ranch was busy and full. Xavier worked long hours, but he always made time for his family. Evening meals were sacred. Everyone gathered around the table to share stories about their day. Josephine taught Thomas his letters while Margaret played at their feet. Xavier would read to them before bed, acting out the exciting parts to make the children laugh. The town that had once overlooked Josephine now respected the Reeves family. Xavier and Josephine had proven themselves as hardworking, honest people who contributed to the community. When Independence needed a new schoolhouse built, Xavier volunteered his time and skills. When families fell on hard times, Josephine was there with food from their garden and clothes she had mended or made. They faced challenges, of course. There were lean years when the crops did not do well, times when money was tight and worry kept them awake at night. But they faced everything together, supporting each other through good times and bad. As the children grew, Xavier and Josephine made sure to teach them important lessons. Thomas learned responsibility and hard work, helping his father with the ranch animals from a young age. Margaret inherited her mother's skill with a needle, spending hours watching Josephine sew and eventually creating her own small projects. But more than skills, Xavier and Josephine taught their children about kindness and acceptance. They made sure Thomas and Margaret understood that everyone deserved to be seen, to be valued, to be treated with dignity. They taught them to stand up for people who were overlooked or mistreated, to use their voices for good. "Your mother taught me one of the most important lessons in life," Xavier told his children one evening as they sat together on their porch. "She taught me to really see people. Not just look at them, but truly see them. Most people move through life half blind, missing what is right in front of them because they are too busy with their own concerns or prejudices. "What do you mean, Papa?" Margaret asked, her young face serious. "I mean that every person has value, but not everyone gets recognized for it. Your mother was invisible to most people in this town for years. They looked right through her, dismissed her, decided who she was without ever taking the time to know her. But I saw her. I saw her strength and kindness, and all the things that made her special, and my life became infinitely richer because of it." Josephine reached over and squeezed his hand. Even after all these years, the love between them was palpable. Thomas and Margaret had grown up witnessing their parents' affection and respect for each other, and it shaped how they viewed relationships and love. In 1888, when Thomas was 8 and Margaret was 6, the family attended the Independence Summer Festival. It had been years since Xavier and Josephine had been to the Harvest Festival where he had punched Johnson for insulting her, and both were curious about how things might be different. The welcome they received was warm. Tom and Maria Patterson were there, now well into their 70s, but still spry and engaged with the community. Mrs. Chen had expanded her cafe and greeted them with enthusiasm, even some of the women who had once been part of Mrs. Abernathy's gossip circle, now older and perhaps wiser, nodded politely. Xavier watched as Josephine moved through the crowd, no longer invisible but visible in all the best ways. People stopped to talk to her, to admire Margaret's dress that Josephine had made, to ask her opinion on various matters. She was no longer the town spinster, rejected and overlooked. She was Mrs. Reeves, respected member of the community, loving wife and mother. "Look at her," Tom said, appearing at Xavier's elbow. "You did that. You saw her when no one else would, and you changed her life." "She changed mine just as much," Xavier replied. "Maybe more. I was drifting before I met her, no purpose or direction. She gave me a reason to put down roots." "That is what love does. It transforms us." Tom clapped him on the shoulder. "You have built a good life, son, a good family. You should be proud." "I am. Every single day." As the years continued to pass, Xavier and Josephine's ranch grew and prospered. They added cattle to their land, then chickens and pigs. Thomas proved to have a natural talent for animal husbandry, while Margaret showed interest in her mother's business, improving and expanding the sewing work. In 1892, Thomas turned 12 and began taking on more adult responsibilities around the ranch. He was growing into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's thoughtful nature. Margaret, at 10, was already an accomplished seamstress, creating garments that rivaled her mother's skill. Xavier sometimes stood on his porch in the evenings, looking out over the land he owned and the house he had built, and marveled at how different his life was from what he had imagined. If someone had told him 10 years ago that he would be here, married with 2 children and a successful ranch, he would not have believed them. But more than the material success, what amazed him was the love. The deep, abiding love he felt for Josephine had not diminished over the years. If anything, it had grown stronger, deepened by shared experiences and weathered challenges. She was his partner in every sense of the word, the person he turned to for advice and comfort and joy. And Josephine, who had once believed herself destined for loneliness, had blossomed in ways no one could have predicted. She was confident now, secure in her place in the world. The shadows of her past no longer defined her. She had built a new identity, one based on love and family and genuine accomplishment. One evening in late autumn of 1893, as they sat together after the children had gone to bed, Josephine turned to Xavier with a familiar look in her eyes. "What?" he asked, smiling. He recognized that expression. She had something to tell him. "I am with child again." Xavier felt his heart expand. Again, are you sure? I am sure. I know my body well enough by now. We are going to have another baby. That is wonderful news. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Another little one to love and raise and watch grow. I could not be happier. Their third child, a son they named Andrew, was born in the spring of 1894. He came into the world quietly, his eyes wide and curious, studying everything around him. Thomas and Margaret were thrilled to have a baby brother, fighting over who got to hold him and help care for him. Xavier was 48 now, his hair showing threads of silver, but he felt younger than he had in years. There was something about holding his newborn son, about starting this journey again, that invigorated him. Josephine, at 44, recovered quickly from the birth. Years of hard work and good food had made her strong and healthy. She moved through her days with practiced efficiency, managing the household and her business and 3 children with grace. The town had long since accepted them as an integral part of the community. When Andrew was baptized at the church, the building was full of well-wishers. The Reeves family had become, in many ways, an example of what hard work and genuine love could accomplish. As Andrew grew, it became clear that he had inherited both his parents' best qualities. He had Xavier's determination and Josephine's creativity, a combination that led to all sorts of interesting projects and ideas. Thomas took his role as big brother seriously, teaching Andrew about the ranch and animals. Margaret doted on him, making him little clothes and toys. The years between 1894 and 1900 were perhaps the most peaceful and prosperous of Xavier and Josephine's marriage. The ranch thrived. The children grew healthy and strong. The love between husband and wife remained steady and true. On their 20th wedding anniversary in January of 1899, Xavier took Josephine into Independence for a special dinner at what had once been Mrs. Chen's small cafe, but was now a well-established restaurant. Thomas, now 17, stayed home to watch Margaret and Andrew. Over a meal of roasted chicken and vegetables, Xavier held Josephine's hand across the table. 20 years. Can you believe it has been 20 years? Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times it feels like we have always been together. Josephine smiled, her face showing the lines of age but still beautiful to Xavier. I am grateful for every single day, Xavier. You gave me a life I never dared to dream of. You gave me one too. Before you, I was just drifting, going through the motions of living without really understanding what life could be. You showed me what it means to have a home, a family, a purpose. We showed each other. She squeezed his hand. That is what partnership means. We built this life together, brick by brick, day by day. Every challenge we faced together. Every joy we experienced, we shared. That is what I am most proud of, not the ranch or the house or even our wonderful children, but the fact that we have been true partners all these years. Xavier raised his glass. To 20 more years. And 20 after that. And every day beyond that we are blessed to have together. They toasted, their eyes locked, the love between them as strong as it had been that first day when Xavier finally worked up the courage to speak to the invisible woman everyone else overlooked. The new century arrived with celebration and anticipation. Thomas was 18 now, a young man making decisions about his future. He had decided to stay on the ranch, working alongside his father and eventually taking over the operation. Margaret, at 16, had expanded her mother's sewing business into a small shop in town, her skills and designs in high demand. Andrew, at 6, was a bundle of energy and curiosity, keeping everyone on their toes. Xavier and Josephine watched their children with pride and joy. They had raised good humans, people who were kind and hardworking and respectful of others. The lessons they had taught about seeing people, really seeing them, had taken root. In the summer of 1900, Thomas announced that he was courting Sarah Mitchell, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Xavier and Josephine liked Sarah immediately. She was a practical young woman with a good heart and a strong work ethic, perfect for the life Thomas had chosen. "He is going to get married someday soon," Josephine said to Xavier one evening as they watched Thomas and Sarah walk together through the garden. "Our boy is becoming a man, he is, and we will probably be grandparents before we know it." Xavier pulled her close. "Does that make you feel old?" "Not old, just grateful. We get to see our children grown and happy, making lives of their own. That is a blessing not everyone receives." Thomas and Sarah married in the spring of 1901, and by the following winter, Josephine and Xavier welcomed their first grandchild, a boy named Xavier Thomas. Holding his grandson for the first time, Xavier felt the cycle of life continuing, felt the love he had built with Josephine extending outward to encompass this new generation. Margaret continued to thrive in her business, becoming one of the most sought-after seamstresses in the region. Young women came from surrounding towns to commission dresses from her. She had taken her mother's skills and expanded on them, adding her own creative touches and staying current with fashion trends. Andrew, growing up watching his siblings' success, developed his own interests. He loved books like his mother and was fascinated by ranching like his father, but he also showed an interest in medicine, often helping when animals on the ranch were sick or injured. "Maybe he will be a doctor," Josephine said one day, watching Andrew carefully bandage a calf's leg. "Or a veterinarian. Whatever he becomes, he will be good at it," Xavier replied. "All our children have that drive, that determination to do things well. They got that from you. They got it from both of us." As the years moved forward, Xavier and Josephine settled into the comfortable rhythm of middle age. They were in their 50s now, their bodies not quite as strong as they once were, but their love had only deepened with time. They spent their evenings on the porch, watching the sunset and talking about their day. They attended church together every Sunday, held hands during the service. They celebrated holidays and milestones with their growing family, creating traditions and memories. The ranch continued to prosper under the joint management of Xavier and Thomas. Father and son worked well together, their skills complementing each other. Thomas brought fresh ideas and energy, while Xavier provided experience and wisdom. Margaret married in 1905 to a kind man named Robert Ellis who supported her business ambitions. They settled in Independence, where Margaret's shop continued to grow. Andrew, at 11, was excelling in school and talking about going to college someday, a dream Xavier and Josephine fully supported. In the winter of 1906, on a cold evening much like the one when they had first met in a meaningful way, Xavier and Josephine sat together in front of their fireplace. The house was quiet, the children grown and gone to their own homes. It was just the two of them again, the way it had been at the beginning. "You remember the first time I saw you?" Xavier asked, his arm around Josephine's shoulders. "Really saw you, I mean. You were standing in the mercantile window looking at that blue calico fabric." I remember thinking how strange it was that someone was watching me. I was so used to being invisible." Josephine snuggled closer to him. "And then you kept watching, kept seeing me, even when everyone else looked away. You changed everything for me, Xavier. We changed everything for each other. I was lost before I found you, drifting through life without purpose or direction. You gave me a reason to stay in one place, to build something lasting. We built it together. This life, this family, this love, it was never just one of us. It was always both of us working toward the same goal." Xavier kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her. After all these years, she still made his heart race, still made him grateful for every single day they had together. I love you, Josephine Reeves. I have loved you since the moment I saw you, and I will love you until my last breath. I love you too. Thank you for seeing me, for making me visible when everyone else had forgotten I existed. They sat together in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the wind howling outside. They had weathered so many storms together, literal and metaphorical, had faced challenges and celebrated triumphs, had raised children and built a life from nothing but love and determination. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. In 1908, Margaret gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Thomas and Sarah had their second child, a daughter. Andrew, now 14, was talking seriously about becoming a veterinarian and was studying hard to achieve that goal. Xavier and Josephine embraced their roles as grandparents with enthusiasm. Their home was often filled with the laughter and chaos of grandchildren, and they loved every moment of it. They told stories about the old days, taught the children about hard work and kindness, passed on the values that had guided their own lives. In the summer of 1910, as Xavier and Josephine celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary, they found themselves reflecting on how far they had come. From that first moment in the mercantile window to this life surrounded by family and love, the journey had been extraordinary. If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing, Josephine said as they walked through their garden, now maintained by both of them with help from their grandchildren. Every challenge, every triumph, every ordinary day, all of it led us here to this moment. I feel the same way. Though I might have punched Johnson a bit harder at that harvest festival, Xavier added with a grin. Josephine laughed, the sound as joyful as it had been 30 years ago. You were quite the hero that night, my brave cowboy defending my honor, always. I will always defend you, protect you, love you. That is what I promised when we married, and I have meant it every single day since. They stood together in the garden, the summer sun warm on their faces, surrounded by the abundance they had created. Vegetables grew in neat rows. Flowers bloomed in patches of color. Bees hummed among the blossoms. Life, in all its beautiful complexity, flourished around them. We did well, Xavier said softly. We took our chance at love, despite all the reasons why we should not have, and we built something beautiful. The most beautiful thing, Josephine agreed. A family, a legacy, a love that will outlast us both. They kissed there in the garden, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love when the world told them not to, who had built a life of meaning and purpose. The town spinster and the cowboy who saw her, now an old married couple still deeply in love, still grateful for every moment they had together. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, the future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. There would be more grandchildren to love, more memories to create, more ordinary days that would become extraordinary simply because they faced them together. They had survived invisibility and found visibility in each other's eyes. They had turned loneliness into belonging. They had created love where none had existed before. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. Not what the town thought or what society dictated or what their histories had been. What mattered was this: two people who saw each other truly, loved each other deeply, and built a life together that honored that love every single day. Their story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It was a story of small moments and steady choices, of daily kindnesses and consistent presence. It was a story of being seen and seeing in return, of two people who refused to accept the limitations society placed on them, and instead created their own definition of happiness. As the sun set on that summer evening in 1910, Xavier and Josephine Reeves stood on their porch, looking out over the land they had built and the life they had created. And they knew with absolute certainty that they had achieved something rare and precious. A love that transformed them both, that made them better than they could have been alone, that would echo through the generations of their family for years to come. And in that moment, as in every moment since that day in 1878 when Xavier first truly saw her, Josephine was anything but invisible. She was radiant, vital, completely and wholly seen, cherished beyond measure by the man who had made it his life's work to ensure she never felt overlooked again.